could happen. Perhaps that's the rumours of wars. I'm not sure. This is interesting. He goes on to 21 verse 10. There will be great earthquakes, famines and pestilences in various places, fearful events and great signs from heaven. I don't need to remind you about this great earthquake in 2004, the Indian Ocean earthquake and following tsunamis. This was the second largest earthquake in recorded history. It had a magnitude of 9.3 on the Richter scale, and it claimed almost 230,000 lives. Let me show you something interesting in Luke 21 verse 25. Jesus said there will be signs in the sun, moon and stars. On the earth nations will be in anguish and perplexity at what? The roaring and tossing of the sea. Have a look at some more, let me jog your memory, some other famous earthquakes. And what I've listed here is probably 1/20th of what I could have listed as great earthquakes. These ones are more memorable because of the lives that they cost, or their recent time in history. Sumatra, 1,303. Kashmir, 79,000 lives. The Java earthquakes and tsunamis. The Solomon Islands. The Sichuan province in China, 61,000 lives. And so on. Right down to July 2009, this month. You know where our most recent earthquake was? New Zealand. Did anyone know about that? You all heard about it? Good. Nice to know New Zealand is still on the map. Here's an interesting headline I'd like to share with you. This was taken from the New Zealand Herald, 2008, July 15. It says the Asia Pacific region must prepare for at least one, possibly more, mega disasters over the next 90 years. Killing, injuring and displacing millions of people, a new study warns. It's been prepared by Geoscience Australia, and it's to help aid agencies plan for the future. Come down to the bottom paragraph here. It says the study said major, relatively infrequent disasters, such as 2004 Boxing Day tsunami, would overwhelm the ability of local and national governments to respond and would require large-scale international aid. Geoscience Australia is warning us that in the next 90 years or so, we can expect millions to either die, be injured or displaced by mega disasters. It's an interesting headline. While Jesus talked about earthquakes, he also had to talk about famines in various places. Let's talk quickly about famines. Famines can be caused by climate or disease. Diseases can be in plant or animal. And of course, some of you know that we have a looming global food crisis. The world is struggling to feed itself. Did you know of 6 billion people, 60% of our population in the world is malnourished? That's an awful lot of people who don't have enough food. 20% of our world's population will starve because they don't have enough food to survive. Looking at land famines, of course, in Africa we have some pretty significant droughts. In Australia, one of the nations which helps to feed the world. Recently we've had some pretty major drought as well, right? In fact, this was the first drought in Australia where urban centres were running out of water. And we heard stories of desalination plants being built at the ocean. We saw bladders on the back of trucks trucking fresh water into towns. Famines can be caused by excessive rain. This is happening around the world as climate change begins to take effect. It can be caused by disease. And secondly, we're going to have a look at a couple of threats to marine life, just briefly. Here's a stat from the World Food Programme's latest report. Currently 10 million people die every year of hunger and hunger-related diseases. Every day, did you know that 16,000 children die of hunger or hunger-related disease? That's one child every 5 seconds. It's a lot of children. Look at this. 19th of June, that's last month. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations released a report saying that world hunger is projected to reach a historic high this year. With over a billion people, I should say, it says a million there, with over 1 billion people going hungry every day, according to new estimates published today. Here's some of the stats. If you look at the last few years, 2006, 873 million were hungry. 2 years later, another 100,000. And of course, as we just read, now over 1 billion people hungry in the world. That's 1 in every 6. Jesus said there would be famines. Some of you may know about the wheat crisis which is looming. Anyone heard about the wheat crisis? Wheat, which is a staple to more than 2 billion of the world's population. Okay? Wheat feeds 1/3 of us around the world. It's facing a crisis. It has these 2 major diseases which are wind-borne, which are affecting crops around the world. UG99 and stem rust. Droughts in Australia and the growing market in Asia are also placing a huge strain on the availability of wheat. They're saying the rich will probably pay more to get their wheat, and the poor may simply die. Some of you may know that wheat-based companies like Sanitarium, who make our breakfast cereals, our Weet-Bix, are now starting to research synthetic wheat options to somehow deal with this looming wheat crisis. I don't want to depress you, but I want you to see what's happening around the world so that you can be alert to the warnings Christ gave us. Dead zones, coastal dead zones. In coastal waters, these are regions of ocean floor deprived of oxygen so badly that not even marine life can survive in it. These are spreading worldwide at an alarming pace, and are decimating the livelihoods of thousands of people, and hence the food source. These are primarily caused by nitrogen and phosphorus, agricultural fertilizers which wash down the rivers and into the ocean. This is a picture of the Baltic Sea, an area of 80,000 square kilometres which is now basically useless to marine life. Well, let's look at signs in the heavens. Climate change. Let me show you a cartoon which kind of sums it up for me. There's 3 guys talking. The guy on the left says, so these scientists did this experiment that if you drop a frog into boiling water, he jumps out. The next thing, but if you put him in warm water and heat it slowly, he just swims around until he's cooked. The guy on the right says, what's the point of that experiment? Let's go to the next scene. Beats me, he says. Scientists go figure. Of course, they're sitting in a slowly warming cauldron. And the guy on the end says, probably the same ones studying global warming. Some people think global warming's not happening. Is it? Isn't it? Take a look at some of the headlines we've seen recently. I don't know how many of you saw these pictures of icebergs floating past the coast of New Zealand back in 2006. You go to the Arctic, up the top of the world. This is a picture taken in 1980 during summer. This is the same picture, simulated of course, taken in 2003. Here's some quotes about the Arctic. Ice at the North Pole is declining on average a rate of 3.3% per decade. In other words, 10% every 30 years. New Zealand Herald, August 08, says the North Pole, the Arctic, could be ice-free during summer as early as 2013. That's kind of sobering, isn't it? Images like this one, which we're used to seeing, the polar bear and its cubs on the side of our Kleenex box, are slowly being replaced by this one. An image you should never expect to see. A polar bear foraging for its food on dry ground. And of course, you know, world organisations are now trying to save the polar bear, doing what they can. So Jesus talked about earthquakes. He talked about famines. He talked about disease. Let's come to disease now. Let me list for you a couple of diseases, human ones, where we have new strains coming up all the time. Let's begin with HIV/AIDS. About 40 million people affected now worldwide. Here comes a list of nasties: the avian flu, malaria, dengue fever, syphilis, gonorrhea, cholera, Ebola, TB, superflus, and cancer. I'll put some scary stats up for you about cancer. Does anyone know how many women will get